Okay, hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the final event of the Open Project. My name is Chiara Alonso. I am project manager at RS 2.0 and coordinator of the Open Project. As we all know, we are here today to celebrate the end of the Open Project, but also to explore how new media and civil society organizations can fight against radicalization and polarization processes among European Muslim youth. The event is going to take about 4 hours. It's streamed on Facebook and YouTube, so you can also join and follow us on both platforms. And the event is going to be divided in 3 different steps, in 3 different moments. In the first one, my colleague Umberto and I will present the Open Project, its rationale and the main activities and outputs produced, with a special focus on research outputs and communication campaign. Afterwards, the second part will house the volunteers and the representatives from partner organizations that will describe the involvement and the experience in the project, and also share their views about the measures tested in the last 2 years, that is to say, during the Open Project. And at the end, a roundtable will welcome different stakeholders invited to discuss about 3 main points. First of all, the isolation and identity issues among Muslim youth living in Europe. New media communication campaign as a tool to fight radicalization and the polarization processes among Muslim youth living in Europe. And the third point that will be covered during the roundtable will be about the potentialities of civil society organizations and the grassroots movements to overcome the Islamic radicalization online. The event will also include, of course, a question and answer session, and will close after the conclusions will be developed. In any case, before going into the details of the project and the implication of new media to fight radicalization processes, that is to say, the core of today's event, I think we should have a general look at the project and the role it plays within the framework of the European policies. Why that? Because in my opinion, the Open Project and the framework it has been developed in represents an outstanding change of course. The Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union declares as one of the European Union's objectives is to ensure high level of security. And precisely to make this security an operational reality, the Internal Security Fund was funded. But it's only in June 2016 when the Commission made a decision showing a clear change of approach, change of attitude. And this is when the Civil Society Empowerment Program was set up. This specific program used the positive power and the tremendous reach of the internet to empower civil society and empower grassroots organizations to provide effective alternatives to the messages coming from violent extremists and terrorists. Because in many cases, civil society organizations are already active in providing alternative narrative and alternative voices, but they often lack the capacity and the resources to produce and disseminate these messages, especially if these messages are expected to be communicated online. And here comes the Open Project, whose aim was to fight against online radicalization among Muslim youth in Europe through a community-based social communication campaign. So the Open Project has been developed under both the ISF program, so the Internal Security Fund program, and the CSEP program, the Civil Society Empowerment Program, which is something remarkable because of the implications of these two programs. It has been implemented between January 2020 and April 2022 by a multicultural team represented by 5 non-profit organizations. 2 of these organizations represented local Muslim communities, and in any case, the partners worked with youth, with local communities in Rome, Nice, Strasbourg, Elche, and Berlin. These teams firstly developed a preliminary research activity to show the ongoing processes in terms of radicalization, mechanisms, and polarization processes among young population in selected and in the mentioned cities. And also presented actions that CSOs and policymakers should take to build increasingly resilient and tolerant societies. So on the basis of these outputs, training and communication activities were outlined to enable local communities to spread the counter narratives and the counter narrative strategies among local youth. But let's be honest. There are many programs and there are many projects with the same aim as open. So it's not the objective itself that makes open a special project. On the contrary, the innovative side of the open project is that this aim is achieved through a community-based approach, which has been used to carry out an online communication campaign, together with training program to empower practitioners and youth on now becoming social activists. So the reach of this project is not just the short term, but also the medium and long term, because in addition to an online communication campaign, also training programs have been developed in order to enable current and future beneficiaries of the project to become social activists and to apply in the future the major outputs of the open project. This is what we developed so far because we believe that the fight against radicalization comes hand in hand with establishing a peace-building process at society level. The insufficiency, or in some cases even the counterproductivity of traditional security approaches is today clear. And when I speak about traditional security approaches, I mean securitanistic approaches. Because since radicalization is a phenomenon mainly affecting young adults in their teens and 20s, frontline practitioners working with youth and the youth itself are key players in securing the success of these community-based approaches. So youth and practitioners working with youth are to be considered the levers of current and future change. But these actors, in many cases, do not have the skills to make the difference. So in Open, we try to build the skills and make them understand what great power they have. So to sum up, after a preliminary research task, an online awareness raising campaign was developed by the members and the volunteers of the civil society organizations involved in the project, guided by Ares 2.0, which as a communication agency was the expert in social communication campaigns. The peer-to-peer campaign was developed thanks to this close cooperation involving practitioners, young people, members of the local Muslim communities, and they all together implemented this online campaign, but also animated selected offline events, which were used to drive the target attention to the online campaign. The campaign spread to new narratives. We found crucial for the fight against radicalization. The first one was a new narrative about, let's say, the real face of Islam. Islam as a religion of peace, tolerance, diversity, rather than the religion of violence and extremists, as it's usually mainstream by the media, and not just the media, but also by the extremist groups themselves. On the other hand, the other new narrative that we try to foster through our communication campaign was the concept of social and cultural diversity of the Muslim community as a plus and a source of pride for the community itself. Indeed, being a Muslim, being a European Muslim, sometimes is perceived as a contradiction among second-generation youth in Europe. And these people often face problems of belonging and problems of identity. And this is dangerous because it's one of the factors often leading to polarization and radicalization processes. So within this framework, and within the framework of these activities, the project involved more than 15 volunteers, 200 young Muslims in both online and offline events, and more than 20,000 people reached through the online campaign of Facebook and Instagram. These are the, let's say, the major points related to the Open project. And now I would like to leave the floor to Umberto, who will give us a picture about the main outputs of the applied research that represented the root of the communication strategy. I have been just, let's say, scratching so far. So thank you very much. And I'll give the floor to Umberto.
Thank you, Chiara. Thank you very much also for the availability. Because I would like to share with you a brief presentation just to introduce you what we have done during these complex projects. I share my screen, if it's possible. Okay. So basically today I would like to share with you the main results of the project. As Chiara told you, the general aim of this project is to fight against the online radicalization process, in particularly close to Rome, Nice, Strasbourg, Berlin, and Elche cities, and also the regions related to these cities. Through online communication campaign, in order to spread out the role of civil society, the role of organization, and work together with this organization. We have several objects, as Chiara well mentioned before, a better understanding on the use of social media by targets in the spread of radicalized behaviors in selected area. And this is one of the most important things today I would like to share with you, because I'm not a communication strategist, but I am a researcher. So today I would like to focus on the main results in research, also because starting from these results, we create we build our communication strategy. Then the third point, the other important object was enhancing critical thinking of Muslim youth at risk of radicalization against Islamic extremist propaganda online. And this is the core of our work. Today I will show you just some feature of that. Basically, today I would like to share with you mostly the first two aspects. Then to stimulate a cognitive opening among radical Muslim youth, empower the civil society and grassroots movement related to Muslim youth, and push them to use open model as daily online activity. And finally, to raise awareness among institutional stakeholders and the other major features of young youth radicalization in reference to region and power of online activists. Today, as I told you, I would like to share with you the results of the research and some preliminary results of the communication campaign. But I would like to focus not just to the results, but to the methodology we used. As far as I think the importance is not to say what we reached, but it's important to understand how we can use the work we have done in the future. And I think the specialization of this project, the open project, it not just refer to the results we reached, but on the possibility to use again the tools we prepared and also the idea of the communication campaign. So today I would like to share with you the part of the research, but also the results of the communication, not in terms of results, but also in terms of the criticality we encounter, also in order to frame how to solve in the future or to be care about some that can be the problems. The research was based on the idea that we have to identify the target audience, basically the people at risk of radicalization. Who are them? Who are their motivation, triggers, beliefs? How they can have access to the information? How they can be at risk? So what kind of pull and factors the groups that spread out extremist ideas use to involve these people? And this is related to the idea to find the proper levers to dissuade the target audience from being attacked from this kind of propaganda. This is the general idea. And it's very important to understand that also in the research part, we use a participatory approach. What does it mean? What does it mean that the research was not conducted by research team properly, but was conducted by the local organization that are not used to do research, but are used to do projects and activities on the social field. But for us, it was very important to give to this organization, our partner of the project, the tools in order to better understand their local context, and at the same time to have data and more clear ideas on how to develop projects, how to develop initiative, how to develop also policy in the local territory. So this participatory approach was based on a toolkit that we prepared, RS 2.0, that also is a research company, and with the support of European Muslim Union, we prepared a toolkit that allow all the organizations involved in the project to understand to better understand their territory. The activity about this research was for a desk analysis, of course, in which to frame how the literature frame the situation, how local, if there are some data at local and national level that can help to understand the importance of the phenomenon of radicalization. Then three elements of field analysis. The first one, the digital ethnography analysis, that I would like to show you in very detail because I think it's the very innovative part of these projects. Then focus groups related with young Muslim people, in order to understand their reality, how they think about their situation, how they believe, and how they live. And then a survey with the other social organizations present in their area. I would like to highlight this aspect because I think it's the very important one. We moved from a scientific research properly to a needs assessment perspective. Basically, the idea is not to have a scientific research, because I think also we don't need it, because if you search carefully, all the information you can collect, they're available in some forms in scientific literature. But it's very important in our case to have very action-related research made by the professional active at social level, in order to have the possibility in the future to carry out very precise strategy to fight against radicalization, to organize social activities, to also prevent radicalization also with policy or at social and political level. So we moved from a scientific perspective to one that more need assessment related and more action related. I think the very innovative aspect of our work was the digital ethnography, because was something that tried to make the organization in strict relation to the online propaganda. Basically, this activity was based on 4 pillars. The platform selection, in which we asked to all the participants to select Facebook, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. They have to decide in which online platform act this ethnography. We use mostly Facebook, and in some cases also Twitter. Then they have to sample, or in other words, they have to search very carefully on the network with the sample methodology, the pages, the actors, the pages and the actors, more or less, that are used to spread out information that can be useful for our project. The sample was based also with the snowball sample. It means that we go in pages and groups, and then starting from 1 or 2 groups, we can improve our research in other groups. And then the third pillar is the data capture. The data capture, well, it means it can be done in 2 ways. Usually can be done with some technological tools that allow us to take all the posts and then to tag with the different categories. This is a very professional way to do this. But as far as I told you, the idea is to give this methodology to people that are not used to make research. We also provide information to how capture data with the concrete visualization day by day. So most of our colleagues spent a lot of hours in the social network to read posts and to catalog these posts in different grids and then to analyze them. It's very time-consuming activity, but help us to understand how in social network that kind of messages was spread. It was quite interesting as activity. Then find the data. The data has to be analyzed. How to analyze this data? Basically, the table I put down is one of the table we used. Basically, we use we find the post. We decided we tag in which page we use it. We found the data, the number of likes, the number of comments, and then we try to understand the grievance beyond this post, the in-think grouping, the antagonizing, and then each researcher puts some notes. This creates a very huge database that we then analyze. This is, I think, the most innovative part of this project, because give us this possibility to have this concrete data. Very time-consuming activity. In some cases, the results was less than we expected, but this happened because, of course, social media has changed during the time, and now has a lot of filter to avoid avoid some kind of propaganda. So at the moment, Facebook and Twitter are more clear than what they was before. Then we also put the attention on focus group. We interview young people and we ask them what kind of Muslim organization do you belong, if they belong in some organization, if how they participate in the social activity in the community, how they got their knowledge of Islam, if they read something online, they frequent some kind of schools, if they read some books, and so on. Then we ask if they are used to belong to a mosque, and what kind of social media they used, how they use it. If they are used to stay in online discussion about Islam, in which site and social page they take information, what kind of activity they done this channel. And then I think the most important part is the feeling and the belonging of these people. If they feel to belong in a wider community, and in this specific aspect, we also ask what does they feel about the European community, and that was quite interesting. The differentiation also in the reply we get. And finally, we built a questionnaire for civil society organization based on 4 pillars, more or less. The first one, and 5 pillars, because the first one was information about the organization. The second one was general context. So we asked to the organization involved what kind of problem the young people face in their district, what they think they can, if the Muslim youth radicalization is a problem in their city or in their local area, and how it's a problem. What kind of causes they see as radicalization, if they have experience with radical people in the past, or they not. And then we ask information about the organizational level, how they organized, if they have specific section for youth, if they work with the local community, with the local municipality, what kind of relation they have with the institution, and so on. And then we develop also information about social media resources. Basically, if this organization use social media, which kind of channel they use, if they are involved in social discussion, and so on. And finally, we divided the questionnaire into areas, the one with Muslim organization and the other one specific for non-Muslim organization. For Muslim organization, we asked information related to how they organize the young people, which kind of relationship they have with the community of Muslim, and so on. And with non-Muslim organization also, we ask something related to their relationship with the Muslim community. Now, just brief results. Today, I don't want to spend too much time on the results because, as I told you, for me, the most important results was that we create something that can be used at local level. But of course, we spend a lot of time to do research, and with something we found. We found, for instance, that we try to radicalize young people. Brief preface. As I told you, social network has increased their policy against radicalization and against violence. So at the moment, they can be used as first link, but they are not the main channel of radicalization, because the new policy are quite effective on that. But in some groups, there are some ideas that can be then deepen with other channels. Basically, the actor would try to radicalize young people, mostly often violence as solution of many problems, the return to a root ideology, the disqualification of other and the us against them, to very close the aspect, because as we see later, most of the people that are involved in this kind of activity feels alone or feels quite disadvantage, and this us against them is very effective way to catch people. Which group of Muslim is more likely to be radicalized? As I told you, the social condition is one of the most important aspects. People who live under social difficult circumstances are more likely to be radicalized than the other. Also, the connection with local Islamic community is very important. People that are lost this connection or has a knowledge about Islam created their own or only with social network, has a distorted idea, and in some cases can be likely to be radicalized than people with the strong connection with the community that know knowledge about Islam in mosque or in the community, and not alone or just in social network. Also, the dynamics of Europe is very important, because young Muslim in most of the case has a multiple discrimination. And this bring them to not feel at home in Europe, or they feel distant to Europe, because they are discriminated at Islamics. They are discriminated as far as they live in difficult circumstances. They are discriminated because they are young, because in most of the European countries, young as a very, for young people, the situation is not so well. So this multiple discrimination can be radicalization more likely. And also the concept of hyper-morality is one of the other important aspects. These are very, very, these are the very, very summary of our research. And this brings us to develop some guidelines for civil society organization in order to try to counter a little bit the Islamic radicalization phenomenon. We evaluated four main spheres. The first one is the inclusive policy. Policymakers should consider that radicalization of young people is often linked to discriminatory experience. So we have to fight the us against them, and the us against them ideology more often depends on the discrimination, on the fact that people feels alone. The victim of discrimination is searching for us, and the policy have to be care of this answer. Home, job, social security are very fundamental tools on that, and policy and also organization have to claim the policy this kind of activity, because otherwise extremist groups can provide some solution, very simplistic solution to ideology, and they can be very effective to these young people. The sense of community is the other focal point. The sense of community against violence, and because violence is not can be considered as a tool for emancipation, but the community, yes. Better knowledge about youth daily routine are another important element, because an organization that know how the young people, how they live and where they live, it's very important in order to produce concrete answers in that case. Then also political education is another key point of that. Democracy is an important tool. In our interview, in some cases, emerged that for some young Muslim, democracy is not a fundamental element. So starting from democracy can be another important element. Also, and this is also something that the organization has to claim, the freedom of practice, religion practices. Another is an European rights. In some cases, it's very effective, but we have to claim on the possibility of freedom, on real freedom of religion. And then also the political participation. In some cases, the discrimination brings people to get out of the society. We have to involve people, in particular the people that feel more discriminated in social and political life, and that is one of the fundamental. Then we have also other two key points that are media education and religious education. Religious education, of course, is the most easy understandable, because if you consider that radicalized people are people that read their religion in not a clear way, it's important that a good Islamic education has to be promoted. Cannot be the simplistic one that we saw in the internet, but has to be developed. Is one of the major shelters against radicalization. Also because we have to improve the idea that radical behaviors are a damage for the entire community. In most of the country analyzed in the project, there are a lot of Islamophobia. And Islamophobia raised also with radical behaviors. So radical behaviors is a damage also for the community itself. And also, and this is the consequence of that, the Muslim organization, the mosque community, has to become the key agency against this radicalization. So it's the community itself that has to be part of this process. And then also the media, it's another important element. As I told you, the policy of the social network at the moment are quite effective, because they try to reduce the hate speech and the radicalization online, but it's not just not enough. So media at local and social level has to create programs to disseminate a positive idea of Muslim community, and can create also, and that's why we try to develop during the project, to show concrete experience and positive approaches. That can be another important tool for civil society organization in order to fight against radicalization.
Sorry, Umberto, we don't display your slides. Please share the screen.
So I talk for 30 minutes without slide. Yeah, just okay. And this is the main results of the communication campaign. Now I would like to give you some tips, but just few tips about the communication campaign. All the data we collect, we used to create this kind of campaign that would like to show faces as experience of good practice in order to propose a very positive way of vision of religion, positive vision of the community, how the network, the community, the social organization can cooperate together. This is a screenshot of our website, and as you can see here, you can see these that are people that we interview during the project that give their message to the community, and that are also people that we found during the project as volunteer or as people that would like to participate in the communication. Just few data, and then I close my intervention, my speech. This is the results we reached in these few months of communication campaign. As you can see, we have 1 million and 1.6 million of impressions, and 800,000 people reached during the campaign. There are quite a big results. These results was possible with the advertising, of course, because this is one of the best tools to involve people. But I would like to share with you some concern about that. When we prepare the project, we put a lot of budget for advertising, because we know that we have to over some problematics related also to Islamophobia. Also, to start with a communication campaign from zero, it's difficult. So advertising is a very important tool. But we encounter a lot of difficulty for the policy I mentioned before, to make advertising in Facebook, but more harder in Instagram and other social networks. It's become difficult and difficult over time. Most of our campaign were excluded by the social network as far as they told about social issue. And at the moment, the social network are trying to avoid the social communication campaign. So we are able to spend only 1/3 of our budget at disposal to create this communication campaign. I would like to give to the floor this element, because if we consider our project as a toolkit to reuse in the future, this can be one of the most problematic aspects in the future. How to develop communication campaign with the policy that becomes more and more difficult and more severe in the future. That is more or less my introduction. I stopped to share my screen, and that's it for the moment. I would like to give the floor for the second part, or to Marina Rodriguez. Now because I told a lot about the results, the methods, and some problems. I would like to give the floor to the people that concretely create the campaign, concretely work on the campaign. So the first speech is from Marina Rodriguez, that works for as a social media, with the social media for ACD La Jolla. And please, Marina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like to share a presentation with you. I don't know if I will be able. Okay. I don't know if you can see it. I don't know. Okay, I will just do it without it. It's okay. So yes, as you said, I was in charge of the social media from Spain, but we not only did we do the social media presentations and the strategy for Facebook and Instagram, but we also created some online events that we named Open Mind Day, that we will talk about it later. And we also created these spaces for local people from a community and from abroad to share their experiences and thoughts about the Muslim community in Spain and in Europe. This way we offer them a space to share what they think. And we also contacted with other organizations from Spain. I see that there is a message. I have it it's in PowerPoint on my computer. I don't know if I can do it. Should I continue?
Yes, we don't see your slide, but
I know the thing is that I think my computer is not allowing me. I have to change
go ahead. Today we are not lucky with slide, I think.
I'm sorry.
I spent 30 minutes to talk with slide, and I don't have slide.
Anyway, I will continue. And as I was saying, we contacted this association from Spain that is fully from Muslim people and women, and they helped us have another vision from real people that is having these real issues and these problems to perfection or information that we were sharing. So at the beginning, what we were doing for the social media, we created this plan. We were posting twice a week for Facebook and Instagram. And what we wanted to do was sharing the diversity inside the community. And we assigned for this to each month a different country with Muslim traditions. And there we shared information, me and my partner, who's not here today, about the gastronomies of these countries, their festivities, the important people that they have, so that we have real examples, and entertainment and festivals and other relevant facts. And I had some examples of the posts that we posted, but we can see it, so I will just say the next thing. Then we changed the strategy, and what we were doing was for each week, we were posting information about important books and movies, and again, role models and other important facts that were entertaining and interesting for people that might not be Muslim, but could use this information to get more interested in these traditions. And for me, in my opinion, this was more funnier or more entertaining for me as a social media manager to find this information and create these posts. Then what we created was the Open Mind Day events. We had two of them. One was last year, I think it was in April, and then we had another one in February this year. And again, what we were doing was sharing the history. You know, in Spain, we are very rooted to the Muslim traditions, and we wanted to share this information with our followers. And we also added some interviews that we were doing. So, as I said before, the interviews we had with Spanish people that are Muslim, they are following this religion, and other people that are from abroad. And we had them sharing their thoughts and their experiences in Spain and in Europe as Muslim people. And I don't know if you have any other question, but I finished. This is my part. I had some posts to show you, but as I can't share my screen, I will just finish here. Thank you very much for letting me share my experience as a social media manager. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I would like to give you the floor now to Programma Integra with Laura Bianconi and Andrea Pintimalli. They are not volunteer of the organization, but Laura is part of the organization, and Andrea is one of the researchers that help us in the organization of the projects. And they will give us a feedback about their work in the project, and particularly with the framework of the activity with young people and so on. So please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Umberto. And are you going? Okay. First of all, so Programma Integra is the other Italian partner together with the coordinator, Ares. We have carried out the local activities here in Rome. First of all, the research activity, which Andrea Pintimalli will tell you about in a moment. Then we have involved representatives of local Muslim community. In particular, I'd like to thank Coreis, the Italian Islamic religious community, and the Association Young Muslim of Italy, which with other stakeholders participated in focus groups and interviews that helped us to understand better the issue in the context of Rome. We carried out the social media campaign, even with the support of young Muslims who realized some videos talking about them and their religion here in Italy. We realized a workshop for social professionals, intercultural mediators, and even students on the themes of polarization and Islam in Italy and the use of social media in this sector. Finally, we realized some laboratories involving young Italians and foreigners, which I'm going to tell you about after Andrea's intervention. And so, Andrea, I leave you the floor.
Thank you, Laura. I will go to say something about the research results, try not to repeat what Umberto already said. So I will focus especially on the Italian case, what is more specific for our country. and especially about what are the risk factors for youth radicalization in Italy for young Muslims. Italy has, this is known, a lesser number, let's say, of here we can say of foreign fighters, but even it is usually said that it is the only country in Western Europe who didn't experience any kind of major terrorist events. So we try to make sense of why this, what can be the factors for this exceptionality. And we saw especially a different analysis of the 125 foreign fighters who left from Italy to join especially ISIS. And of course, there is these factors, these social factors of risk related to unemployment and discrimination. If we look at these profiles, we found that most of them were employed in manual jobs, lesser in office jobs, lesser students and unemployed. While, of course, there is an ongoing debate about what is the eventual sense of belonging of young Muslims to Europe. We will say more about this later. We found in these Italian profiles some of characteristics that are common to all the studied cases over Europe, like an authoritarian education, especially cases when there is some experience of violence within the family, conflict-ridden family relationships, often in connection with parental separation, a fragile personality in adolescence with low social resonance and resilience, experiences of discrimination. Discrimination as a collective, discrimination as a group for being Muslim. And the opportunity to come into contact with members of violent radicalism. The places, as Umberto said before, the typical places considered to be at risk for radicalization are mosques, some of them. Another typical place is the prison, which is considered so vulnerable to radicalization processes, especially because it is felt as a place where religious rights are not respected, are not granted, especially for Muslim believers. So there is a kind of explicit discrimination in religious rights. And of course, the web, and especially social media. Now, what are the best practices in Italy, usually at institutional level and CSOs levels, so at the level of civil organizations? There is this called Patto per l'Islam Italiano, which is part of the national policies to create some kind of network between leadership, Muslim leadership in Italy, and institutional organization, especially the Minister for Internal Affairs. There is the UCOI, which is another social organization, a very ancient one, present in Italy since some decades. And there are several, of course, initiatives and projects by the social association in society. And I will say more about these European programs, which are for schools, years and SORAPs, intercultural education through religious studies and study of religions against prejudices and stereotypes. So what we have found in the Italian situation, we have found in social media that we can detect a very few results related to, let's say, radical narratives, radical organizations, or at least what is public accessible, and social media was little. There were a few content available, and they were centered on the typical recurring theme of polarization and narratives of, let's say, the most present one is the Zionist conspiracy with Israel and the United States as co-leader against Muslim people, again, Muslim believers. This is the questionnaire Umberto mentioned before, so I will skip this part and going directly to, I here highlight especially the Italian results when they are particularly different from that in other countries. Like here, you can say the first column, in the first column, there is a percentage, and a higher percentage in Italian responses of people that see job possibility as a struggle for young people, that young Muslim people must face in Italy. This, for example, is a fact that points to the difficulties of young Muslim in Italy with the social condition. There is generally more social issues in finding a social position, finding simply a job with respect to other countries, with respect to the other countries involved, such as the United Kingdom, German, or France. And the same goes here for participants see social exclusion as a cause for radicalization of young Muslims. Again, you can see that in Italy, the percentage of positive response to this question is higher than 80%, and it is very different from other countries. And again, here we can skip. And at the same time, on another side, we can see here that it is very low. At the opposite, the percentage of positive response about if young Muslims are offered with political or cultural education, or are offered with exchange between young people with different faith background. And this is also a specificity of the Italian situation, about which we will talk about more in the third part in the roundtable. To summarize, looking at some study like the one made by Renzo Buolo, professor at University of Padua, we can see that the few Italian cases of radicalization are usually isolated cases in which the social difficulties are intertwined with personal sufferances and give place to isolated scant events, like when, for example, this Domenico Quaranta, a Sicilian painter, converted to radical Islam in prison, placed some gas cylinders which did not cause victims and cause minor damage. Or this Mohammed al-Khatib of Palestinian origin filled his car with petrol and gas, blew himself up in front of the synagogue of the Emilian city of Modena without causing victims. Or again, the 36-year-old Mustafa Shawqi of Moroccan origins sent a letter to the Questura of Milan, and then he blew up his car in front of McDonald's in Brescia, losing his life without causing any other victims. So the final consideration is that in this story, there is a personal suffering more than an ideological adherence to any kind of organization or specific narratives. Sorry, let's stay here for a moment. So the framework, the image that appears from the research on radical narratives in Italy on social networks and terroristic and radicalized events is the image of small phenomenon, smaller than what happened in any other European major countries. We will see more about why it's like that. An important point is a lack of knowledge about Islam and religions in general. That's also what we try to work with, since we realized also a webinar about radicalization mechanisms and stories of radicalized Italians. For educators, social workers, and general public, especially to grow awareness of the phenomenon, on the factors that produces it. What appears is a very basic lack of knowledge about Islamic religion. And at the same time, a very strong desire to know more about it. But it's quite clear how in this lack of knowledge, which is ubiquitous, Italians don't know too much about Islamic religion. Also, young Muslims in Italy are very often have not a religious education, so very often they don't know about their own religion. And this situation of ignorance, of lacking of knowledge about religion, give places to very simplistic and then polarized and violent narratives about the dynamic, the typical dynamic, us versus them. And that is true in somehow in multiple directions, because there is us versus them as European versus immigrants, as religious people against laics, where you can find on one side at the same time, for example, often Muslim and Christians, and on the other side, let's say lay people, like peoples. And again, religion against religion. So we found very, very efficient and effective, interesting to spread some general knowledge about different religious traditions, and also, and I think it's the most important point, having believers more aware, more self-aware of what they practice and believe. Okay, I'll give the floor to Laura for the workshops.
Yes, as I said before, our last activities was these 3 workshops realized here in Rome. One in a high school with the 15 Italian boys and girls. The school is in a particular context, such of Rome, socially difficult, and where there is almost a separation between the population groups living there. For example, there have been also some protests, even violent ones, against Roma people living there. We realized another workshop in an educational community for unaccompanied foreign minors, and the 3rd workshop in a daily center for foreign minors called Civico Zero. The main theme was covered in the workshops was the religious pluralism, with a focus on religious pluralism here in Rome. We reflected on the concept of religion and faith, asked them what religion, faith means to them, how they live it, and especially now that they are in Italy. Of course, this last point concerned the young migrants participating in the workshop. We have seen which, how many, and where are the main places of worship of the many religions present here in Rome. Even through pictures, Google Maps, we have talked about the main characteristic of the various religions, especially the Muslim one, and these different religions here in Rome and in Italy, mainly Christian and Catholic context. We have noticed that there are a lot of similarities between different religions, and so we reflected on this, and we have also involved the young in some activities on these themes. Here you can see some pictures of these three workshops. This is the daily center for foreign minors, and we have also pictures of the other two contexts. This is the high school. Finally, I'd like to point out some points emerge in the workshop. So in general, boys and girls don't know about religious pluralism in general, in Rome, in Italy, etc. And we would like to point out some differences between migrants involved in the workshop, mainly Muslims, and the Italian youth, mainly Catholics, or in any case, educated in a strongly Catholic culture. So in the centers for foreign youth, religious is an obvious element. For the young foreigners, the young migrants involved, most of them Muslims, it's a natural fact that religion is an important part of their lives. And we didn't find any element of radicalization. On the contrary, a great openness toward other religions and faith. On the contrary, in the high school, to be believer is not taken for granted. Indeed, often religion is seen as a negative element. There is a general feelings of rejection and opposition, also as a consequence of a society still very much based on Catholicism and Christianity. There is no particular opposition to Muslims, or at least not as much as in other European countries, where, for example, there have been some Islamic-related attacks that could exacerbate this feeling. So these are the main elements emerged in the workshop, and the main activities realized here in Rome by Programma Integra. Here's our contacts to be in touch, and thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Laura, for your presentation. Now it's the turn of Samir Achka. He is a volunteer from France. Anyway, Samir has some problem with the connection, but as far as we are very prevalent, he recorded for us a video that I would like to show you. So please. Now the video will start. Claudio, the video.
Hello everybody, so my name is Samir Akasha, I'm 34, I live in Marseille, and a few months ago I was working with Coconut on the Open project, and I will give you a bit of my background before speaking about this special project. So I was born in Algeria. I came when I was 7 to France, and for the longest time I was really curious about like other identities, and until high school, university, I never had, for example, a Jewish friend. I never shared some spaces with so many diverse cultures, and for me it was like something was missing in my identity. I'm an Arab, I'm Algerian, I'm French, I'm European, I'm Muslim. And I felt that even if I was living in Marseille with so many diversities and cultural backgrounds, I wasn't really connecting much with others because the context wasn't helping. My social circles were not really helping. And so I started to discover European projects and work on the theme and topics of citizenship. And so I just started to travel all around Europe doing youth exchanges, training courses, and this really started to impact me in a very positive way because I was even more curious about people who are different than me. And so after a few years of traveling and building this new European identity, a friend of mine, she said, "Hey, Samir, I'm part of an organization and we are going to Jerusalem in a few months. Do you want to join?" And it was an interfaith organization, and I've never been to an interfaith project or whatever. I never heard about interfaith collaborations, and I was like so curious, and I was like, yes, for sure. And so we started to prepare this with different partners in France, with one youth organization called Coexister, which is the interfaith youth movement in France and also in other countries, European countries for now. And I was really interested. So we went, and I landed in Tel Aviv. Then we went to Jerusalem, to Bethlehem, to Ramallah. It was a trip that was really fundamental and important for me. And when I came back, I was thirsty of those interfaith connections. Then after that, I decided to join another program called the Interfaith Tour. As a Muslim, I traveled with Lucy, Leah, and Ariane, a Jew, a Christian, and an atheist, and we did 32 countries in 10 months to discover interfaith initiatives, how different communities decided to collaborate with one another to tackle some big challenges like questions about the environment, education, art, human rights, and that was the experience of my life. When I was approached to be part of the Open Project about radicalization, Islam, identity, I was first reluctant because in France the context is quite heavy, and there is a lot of stigmatization of the Muslim community. So every time we hear about radicalization, we try to understand who is speaking from which point of view. And so at first I didn't want to be part of this project because I was tired, because on the media with the politics my identity was being questioned every day and that was quite heavy. But when I talked with the organization, they said I could also bring to the table some new ideas with my experience. And so what I wanted to do is to have this project but have another point of view, another angle. This is why when we organized the seminar, for example, we decided to analyze the counter-radicalization measures that were being operated by France and other European governments, and to see the consequences on the Muslim population, for example. The people who were targeted but who were innocent of radicalization. And so it was wonderful for me because I could ask inside my network what they thought about this, and I could bring to the table some researchers, journalists, people involved with the question of interfaith at the UN level, and some politicians. And for me, it was just amazing to see different energies and experiences, even a Muslim school in Marseille testifying about their reality. And the second aspect was living together as a tool for counter-radicalization. For me, a project like Open was the possibility to really reflect and question and gather the right energies at the right moment. So for me, the seminar was amazing. And then we had the possibility of organizing a podcast. First, we have beautiful energies and initiatives in France and in Europe to counter radicalization at the basic level, creating connections with the right people. And another aspect that was fundamental also that appeared in the seminar and also in the street interviews that we did is there is the context of social justice and economical justice. Poverty, exclusion, racism, anti-Semitism creates sometimes strong feelings in some people, and when they lose connection connection with either reality or a community, they can get radicalized more easily. And so a lot of people were aware that violence that was chosen could be prevented somehow by a collective effort of willing to connect everybody and willing to assist them in their socio-economical integration. So for me, this seminar and those street interviews and the podcast and all the people who were connected to this project through Coconut Work and the Open Stay With Us project, that was just an amazing collective work and energy. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank everybody in this room. Sorry, I can't be with you online because I'm traveling for another project right now. But yes, thank you for your efforts, and hopefully with our common understanding and knowledge and connections, we will have a positive impact on those topics in the future. So thank you very much, and the room is yours again. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Actually, Samir is here, so if you have any question for him, you can write and we will ask him clarification or future information. Thank you to all the participants in these first two phases. And now I would like to give the floor for we talk a lot about our project, we talk a lot about what we have done. I think now it's important to develop the topics that are underlined by this project. So we organized this roundtable with a lot of experts, some from the project, some from other projects or from other organizations, in order to share information about radicalization, about Muslim identity, about the role of civil society to counter the phenomenon of radicalization. So I will give the floor to Michele Giovanardi that will moderate the roundtable in order to present the roundtable and to give us the possibility to reflect about these important topics.
Thank you so much, Umberto. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm Michele Giovanardi. I'm a researcher and project manager of the Global Peace Tech Hub at the European University Institute. And actually, it's very interesting to be here. It was interesting to hear your presentation, because what we're trying to do with the Global Peace Tech Hub is to build a platform where we bring together academics, practitioners, NGOs, and startups, and we research and debate the use of technology for peace. And of course, this is very broad in terms of the technology you can use, but also of the peace building areas. But digital platforms is definitely part of it. And of course, digital platforms are giving us unprecedented opportunities in terms of fighting stereotypes, building empathy and trust, and creating these communities of trust. But at the same time, we see that the same platforms are a vehicle to spread fake news, polarization, disinformation, and internal radicalization and violence and hate. So it's really nice to be part of this conversation. And it's very important what you're doing with Open, with this project and with similar projects, trying to both research, but also to understand what we can do to limit the negative effects and to promote the best practices. So now we will have a roundtable about this, and we want to try to, of course, also have your opinion and your take about the topic, but at the same time get to a point in which we also discuss a little bit the solutions. So what we can do actually to counter these narratives online, and what's your experience, and what's the role of civil society in all of that. And to do that, we have some very important speakers that I thank for being here. We have Hekrem Sahin, which is the director of the European Muslim Union. We have Andrea Pintimali, that you already met during the first part. He's a researcher at La Sapienza University in Rome, but also researcher for the program Integra that he presented before. And then we have Eduardo Macia from the association, the ACD La Hoya, and 2 researchers from the European Foundation for South Asian Studies, which are Anne Eckendorf and Joanna Barakova. So I would like to start with Ekrem Sahin, so the director of the European Muslim Union, which is an organization representing Muslim citizens of Europe based in Strasbourg. And they are working on many different areas and domain, and Ekrem can explain better what his organization is doing, but they are working in the area of human rights and fight against racism and discrimination, intercultural dialogue, and democratic participation. So I think your place very well to start this conversation. And what I wanted to ask you is, from your perspective and from your experience, do you think that the identity of young Muslims in Europe are at risk of radicalization, and where is this risk coming from? So I will leave the floor to you, and then we will proceed with the other speakers on this first question, and then we can have a second round more on the solutions. So before the analysis and then the kind of solutions. So Ekrem, to you.
Thank you so much. I would like to make a little introduction about the organization, European Muslim. It's like EMU. It's like we're based in Strasbourg. We are working on different area. The most of important area that's like we're making reports called EMU reports. We're making report on every country. Like we choose one country for every year, and we are trying to make a report about the situation of Muslim. We begin about a sociological basis. We make some inquiries, some survey about to know the different problems that we can face. We also trying to also monitoring about human rights violation in this country, and we are trying to like develop a different program after we make the project. And for every project, we try to share also with different international organizations like the Council of Europe, European Union, so to make like focus about this kind of topics. That's one of the big area that we made. We made also like a lot of sensibilization about all the aims that you already said about the citizenship, living together, and different program. And we also make a lot of European projects about different topics too. To be honest, it will be like difficult to speak a lot because the thing that we already say a lot of things, and I don't want to repeat a lot. And I would like to show also about my perspective. It's like we speak about radicalization. The radicalization about the Muslim side is very difficult to speak about. It's like kind of taboo. It's like when I can give about my personal perspective, like we work in Strasbourg as a French participant for the project, and we try to like in the first step trying to call with different stakeholders like the mosque and etc. and different organizations deal with Muslim people. But the first step that we have some obstacle, like they don't really understand what we want to, different activity that we want to do, because it's like when we speak about radicalization, and now in France, like we have like different perspective on it. Like we have like a new law, like it's called a separatism law, and it's very difficult to deal with this kind of problem. That's what one of the big problems that we have. It's like to find really stakeholders to work in it. But I would just make like some sum up that we already say about, like to make like an introduction, that we have a lot of we'll have a description about Muslim and about the type of radicalization. I just like to underline some kind of stuff. It's like most of the time, like we already said, it's like they have a lack of information. They are isolated about the community. There are some social problem. It's not just like when we speak about radicalization, it's like more a process. It's like not on one day you are radicalized and some kind of stuff. It's like and the target group that it's more like on 15 and 25 years old. And it's like the timeline in the teenage, as a teenage, it's like the timeline that they build up their own identity. They are more influenced, and they have a lot of question about it. And we have to underline also that Muslim people most of the time have immigrant backgrounds, and they face a lot of discrimination, social discrimination, and different discrimination. That can be really difficult, like for people. I can say I would like to speak about it. I don't want to repeat a lot of about that we already said. But the thing is like the example that they give from Italy, it's like the same thing like in France and different countries. I think it's like they have a lot of problem about it to speak about it. I can like give you an example that we do. Because I know that this was the second question, but it's like we have to make a lot of program on it. I will wait for the next question if you want for making some solution about it, because I have not a lot of solution to do it. That's it. I can just give some information about the new law. That's to share experience about the France perspective. It's like in France now we have a law. It's called the separatism law, and now it's like radicalization, like having some thinking of or radical thinking. It wasn't like forbid, because we have freedom of expression, freedom of thinking, and etc. The base of the law, it was like when they go like to act about violentism acts or some kind of stuff. That was this kind of problem. But now with the new law, they make like when some of just imam in some mosque speak about, I don't know, in a not good way about when we speak about, I don't know, some community in his speech, that they can just close the mosques. And now we have a lot of mosques. Just the last week we have 3 or 4 mosques already closed too. And that's why it's so difficult to speak with different organizations. They have already like have some fear to speak about it, because they don't want to close also their mosque. I just want to share this kind of experience that we have, and I can continue about most of the solution that we can give about how, as NGO, we can like deal with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, indeed, we will tackle the solution in the second round. But first, I wanted to also ask you, I know you cannot talk on behalf of the whole Muslim community, but from your experience and the access you get to the Muslim youth with your organization, what do you think of some of the themes that were mentioned about identity, religion, and radicalization? Because some of the findings I see are trying to stress that this is a different story. So Islamic extremism is different from Muslim extremists, and religion can be part of it, but maybe the story is broader and is not the only factor about radicalization. So talking about the identity of young Muslim, how are these 3 elements going together: religion and identity, extremism, radicalization? Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that? I know it's not an easy question, quite broad, but it would be interesting to have your take.
I will try like to give for my further experience. We don't like face a lot of people like going to radicalization. I can give this example, like we are in Strasbourg. We make a lot of research about what's the situation of Strasbourg about radicalization. We just see that it was just a little neighborhood that they have 6 young guy just go to Syria making some war. And the thing, it's like they have, it's a very difficult topic. It's like in a young perspective, they have like a lot of discrimination. They see they're not well included in the community, and they want to make their own identity. You speak about European identity, that they can't like be included because they are not. They have some discrimination, or I don't know. They don't really feel inside, because all the time they have a lot of discrimination. And if we go like to social media and the news, every day we speak about a lot of Islam. I don't know, some problem with Islamophobia and this kind of stuff. And we have also like, it's not just in France, like in Europe, like we speak up inside one side, like we speak about radicalization, but in the other side, we have, like you said, a rise about Islamophobia. We have also rise about far right thinking and about more national thinking. And it's very difficult to say that it's not just one factor can be the reason to be radicalized. It's like the addition of different things. Like I can give an example. One of the guys, like he don't have a father. He don't really go to school. He wasn't included in this community because nobody want to speak with him and want to enjoy his time with him. He tried to like comfort him, like he want to find a solution with him, and he finds some online stuff about speaking in Islam, like in a shorter way, and they have a very big lack about Islam. They don't know about the religion, and they have a different perspective. And we can also underline a big thing that's about this. It's like for European young Muslim people, they don't really know the historical about ideology, like Salafism or some kind of different radical thinking. They really don't know. They just don't know sometimes the terminology, but they don't know what was the history, what's his insight, what really they do it. But you know that we are faced now about a community very well connected. Every information is like it's going so fast, and they really want to take some information by social media, by website, and they really don't check the news. That's why it's like a lot of information, and they have a inside problem about every social problem that they have. And it's an addition of different factors that they go to the radicalization. I don't know if I answer to your question.
Yeah, indeed, it's not an easy answer. Of course, we have many elements to it, but it was. Thank you so much, Ekrem, because it was a very good start of this conversation, and also good assist to Andrea Pintimalli. And I would like, Andrea is researching, is an anthropologist, and his research focuses on anthropology and religion and processes of radicalization. So what is your take on this? So what's your analysis of radicalizations or of the factors leading to it before? So let's keep the focus on the causes and on the problem before moving to the bright side. So let's keep the focus on the analysis now. So the floor is for you if you want to add something to what Ekrem said.
Yeah, sure. Thanks to Ekrem also, it was very interesting. And I would say my expertise, let's say, it's the study of religions, is comparative religion. In Rome, it is history of religions. We care a lot about history and historical point of view. So what I would say is that the main point here is, like Ekrem said, is identity. And I think it's not the case that usually the typical, the most common profile for a radicalized one is young age. You know, it's a moment, like Ekrem said, in which I'm trying, I as a subject, I'm trying to find my place in society. I'm building up my identity, my place in the world, let's say. And this can be, of course, difficult and also tricky, especially if I move from a context to another totally different, as is in the case of immigrants, even when it is second generation, because I can find myself in a context which gives me very different inputs from what I receive, let's say my family, wherever. And the point is, religious narratives address something very deep in connection to identity. I mean, the problem, the question, the main question in this age usually is where I position myself. Who am I in relation to my context? So in many cases, religious narratives, let's speak in general of religious narratives, not necessarily Islam, give me a context, give me a framework in which I can position myself, I can say who I am. And this can be particularly evident in our contemporary Western society, where the great narratives, the great frameworks to understand life, to position myself, are, let's say, less defined. You know? We speak of the end of the great narratives, well, political, ideological, religious ones. So I can find myself in a context where there is no easily detectable context to position myself, and this need to understand the position, to find an identity for myself, and often it is an identity based on differentiation. I'm this because I'm not that. And so on. When, let's say, a radical narrative, a simplistic way of describing the world is offered to me, and I'm in such a strong need for this, because I need a narration for my life, a direction. It's a very basic human need. Then I can be vulnerable. I can become vulnerable to this kind of radical narratives, very simplistic and polarized visions of the world, etc. And I think it's exactly what happened. And I think in this context, it is very important also to address the general question of religions. That's why we also worked with history of religions and religious pluralism. Because it is important. When we speak about religious pluralism, of course, we speak also about atheism, or agnosticism. That's not the point. But to address that kind of question, to don't leave that unaddressed. Otherwise, as Ekrem was saying, most of the young people just find some very low quality contents on the web and go in that direction.
Okay, thank you for your insight. It was very interesting. Your perspective and the key question you raised. So, what's my place in the world? You said so. The identity question connected to religion and religious pluralism. Yeah, Ekrem, if you have like you had your hand raised, if you have a quick feedback, because then I have to move to the next.
Yes, just add some information because it was so interested what she say, Andrea. It's like to feel as a perspective of Muslim people. It's like you have like migrant background, like you have in timeline, like in a teenage you make own identity, but you have like deal in first step, like you are migrants, you are like French, you have some migrant origins, you are Muslim, you have faced a lot of discrimination. It's very difficult like to build about an identity. What can be really difficulties that it's additional things that can be the processing to go to radicalization. And it also like it's very interesting to speak about also the context, because Andre already said it's like when you like researching about information, but they don't know about the context. It's like when you speak the base of Islam, it's like the Quran, it's the revealed book about Islam, and it's like if it's every revelation, it's like it's given in a specific context. It's like it's giving by surat. It's like every surat just came into and in different steps. It's not like it's not given in one time the book. It's like it's given in 22 years, and for every specific things that they have some new thing revealed. And when we have to study about Quran, you have to like also study about the context. You have like, you right, that your duty, but you also to understand why you have this duty and what was the context. I think that's when we speak about information, it's very shorter that they just know about the information, but they really don't know about the context.
Thank you. now you raised other question that I would like to ask you, but maybe I keep it for later on the compatibility of the identities. You mentioned all these identities, and are these compatible also with the European identity? But let's move forward, and I would like to go to Anne Heckendorf and Joanna Barakova. They are two researchers from the European Foundation for South Asian Studies, and I will start with Anne. And Anne is an Amsterdam-based researcher working for this foundation, and she has a background in international law and conflict studies at the University of Tilburg and the University of Utrecht. So her research focuses on protected armed conflict in South and Southeast Asia, so a different region, of course, and counterterrorism policy and its effects on fundamental rights. But she also works on de-radicalization in Europe. So, Anne, what is your perspective on this first conversation on radicalization and identity, and also if you want to engage with some of the points raised by Ekrem and Andrea?
I would actually like to directly connect to what Andrea said, because I think it's true that a good way of seeing religion, not only radical Islam, but religion generally, is as an identity marker. And also the link with group belonging, I think, is clear. And what is also relevant for radicalization is that we know from social identity theories, for example, that people, when they're faced with insecurities, they have a stronger urge to connect to a group, to belong to a group. So this there's a term that is called entitativity that describes how strong a worldview and ideology prescribes how clear the way forward is, how clear the image of the enemy is. These groups are more desired by people when they face insecurities. And insecurities could be, for example, financial insecurity, could be even mental illness, could be some experiences of discrimination. And I think this is, in essence, what is an important part of the process of de-radicalization, this need to belong to a group and to have these psychosocial needs fulfilled. And that also connects to one of the leading theories, I think, in that can explain radicalization in a rather broad theory, which I think is necessary because radicalization is a multi-causal and very complex process. And that is the significance quest theory, that basically says that people are attracted to radical ideologies because they provide them with meaning and purpose. And that is exactly what terrorist groups, for example, do when they distribute propaganda. They use religion as a cover, they use ideology as a cover, but actually it appeals to a sense of community. It appeals to you can join us, you can have your brotherhood, fight for a just cause. It's adventurous. You have a purpose in life, so that's very attractive to people. And obviously, I think there's some demographics that are maybe more vulnerable to that. But that said, I would also like to just point to the fact that it's very dangerous, I think, to talk about Muslims in Europe or to talk about predictive factors, because that would suggest that Muslims in Europe are a homogeneous group, and that's very misleading. I think from a theoretical perspective, but also it's not socially desirable, because we know, for example, that there are some demographics, like, for example, second generation immigrants or people from lower social economic backgrounds that are maybe more likely to be radicalized. But the problem is, if we single out this demographic and we present them as sort of a risk group, then we achieve exactly the opposite effect of what we want to achieve, because most of these people obviously have absolutely no propensity towards violence or radicalism. But if you present them as a risk group that leads to discrimination, and that in fact is a driver of radicalization. And I mean, of course, that does not mean that such factors do not exist and that they could not be useful. And there are some initiatives, for example, maybe you know the European database of terrorist offenders, which basically is an attempt to collect anonymized information of terrorist offenders and make a database from their psychological profiles, their social background, and so on, with the aim of being able to have predictors. But I think the problem with that is that we have to be very, very careful, firstly, in how we use those information and how we communicate them to the public, because I think there's a very big risk of that being politicized. in a way that is not socially desirable.
Thank you very much, Anne, for your insights and connecting this to the social identity theory as well, and showing that much of this debate is also about insecurity, as you said, and social, fueled by different factors as well, and ideology can be just the cover, as you said. So now I will leave the floor to Joanna Barakova. She's also a member of the European Foundation of South Asian Studies, and she holds a degree in criminology from the University of Leicester. And her research focuses on prevention of radicalization, counterterrorism, human rights protection, especially in Indo-Pakistan relations and the Jammu and Kashmir conflict. So I think this is quite a lot, and you can give us many interesting thoughts about this issue and add to this conversation. So the floor is for you.
Thank you. I very much echo what my colleague earlier said, and also Andrea, in the sense that, you know, in order to look at radicalization of Muslims in Europe, the contexts are extremely different. There are various push and pull factors of why someone is, you know, going on that road. As my colleague already mentioned, you know, significance quest. But to be very honest, I would prefer to build up on a bit more of a broader umbrella theoretical framework, and that is you know, you have three different layers, and you have like micro factors, you have meso factors, and you have macro factors of why people decide to, you know, why people actually get indoctrinated. So one of the micro factors could be the so-called personal grievance. So that is anger and vengeance for harm to self or loved ones. Then you have the group grievance. So that could be the outrage for injustice done to a larger group where the person feels that they belong or they hold dear. You could also have as a micro factor the slippery slope, where someone, you know, participates in radical acts and progressively it culminates in getting into a terrorist or extremist activity. You could have another factor on a micro level is love. So it's helping a friend or a loved one and who is already radicalized. You have what also goes alongside with my colleague said, also status seeking. So that would be like risk, glory, and power seeking reasons, especially by young men. Then you have the escapism factor. So that's trying to escape from personal problems and getting again towards this road. And then you also have the unfreezing factor, which is basically when people feel, when they experience a time of personal disconnect, they open up to new ideas or new people, which could create this like floodgates where, you know, someone jumps in who is already radicalized and is trying to create, to also offer that to the person. Then you have the meso factor. So meso factor relates to group grievances and aspects affecting the community identity too. So that's so basically on more of the group level scale. So that could be like a group polarization. So and there are three types of intergroup conflict. So you have, for example, condensation. So that's competition with state power as less committed of the members of the group drop off. Then you have outbidding. So that's basically competition for the same base. And then you have fissioning, which is within group competition. And lastly, you have the so-called macro factors, which relate to the major global aspects which influence a group or an individual's decision making and affect their performance and strategies. And such mass level factors include wider public recognition of the enemy as intrinsically evil or harmful, so hate. So this is where you see on the global scale, you know, populist discourses or like hate speech. You have the martyrdom factor, which is like mobilization of opinion and action by an individual's self-sacrifice and his designation or her designation as a martyr. And then you have jujitsu politics, which is more of basically the mobilization of new support for terrorism by state overreacting to terrorist attacks. So jujitsu politics is oftentimes also this kind of discourse between far right and, you know, jihadist extremist groups, which in general feed off this rhetoric. So these are all different, actually push and pull factors which lead potentially to someone's individual radicalization or group radicalization. And why it's important to mention them is because they all play a role in also what narrative an extremist groups is using. If they see that someone is, status seeking, this like risk, glory type of seeking, they would much more capitalize on those kind of narratives of, attraction. If they see that someone is much more trying to escape their own problems, the approach is different. So in order to, and I believe this would be like what we're discussing in the subsequent, part of the discussion, in order to actually develop the approach that will address the problem most adequately, first, a very deep understanding of all these reasons, as my colleague Anne and also Andrea said earlier, needs to be there to also know how to design this kind of comprehensive approach. But again, what I was trying to explain by this very quick, overview is that the contexts are very different, the reasons are very different. So just on a European level, it's completely impossible. You need to look at particular group or a person to answer those very high spectrum questions.
Thank you so much you said quick, but very comprehensive overview. And that's indeed very important for the discussion we will have later about the best strategies. But I must apologize because I forgot part of your profile, which is your project manager at the project Free for Youth. So this is a project that aims at improving life quality of the youth in the region of Jammu and Kashmir, also through tackling terrorism and radicalization of youth in that area. So one question, I don't know if you can answer now or later, but it would be also about if you maybe notice some similarities or differences of these two different contexts. So the context you are researching there and the context that was presented today, which was Europe. Of course, it's not a very easy question, but it would be nice to get the two perspectives, as you said, depending also on the factors and the different levels, micro, meso, and macro that you mentioned.
Do you want me to answer now or when we're going to?
Maybe it's good if you answer now and.
Okay, so the first thing that comes to my mind is basically the approach that works, because if you think about it, and I believe my colleague again will go into a bit more depth into that discussion about like counter narratives, and in a lot of ways they've proven that in the context of Europe, especially when they're like online, they're basically a bit of a hypodermic needle type of approach. They tackle very much on the surface, they're tackling the symptoms, and it has this limited opinion that the person who is radical is equally receptive of this stimuli. So if they're radicalized and you give them a counter message, they would de-radicalize. And I think there's a lot of discussion on that in the context of Europe, that it's not that successful and sometimes it's counterproductive. I think the difference here comes when you're working in an actual conflict zone or in a place where terrorism originates. Like in our case, we work a lot in the region of Jammu and Kashmir, also Afghanistan, etc. And there you need the counter narrative to begin with, because there it's not like in Europe where you thankfully you don't live in a or at least in Western Europe in a conflict area. But when you're surrounded by this constant propaganda and preaching from terrorist groups that are trying to recruit, you cannot start with an alternative narrative where you're approaching youngsters and you're giving them the necessary skills. And you need to first tackle the extremist narrative. So you first of all, alongside with providing them with skills, you need to also teach them how to become critical. That was my plan on discussing the whole project and how we've shaped all the activities around this understanding. And the findings that we constantly improved is that we've engaged a large spectrum of different actors that would share this message. Like, for example, an imam is best positioned to first explain how jihadist groups are exploiting, you know, religion and explain to the youth, you know, the righteous readings. At the same time, you have a frontline practitioner who is best positioned to, you know, also train them into certain skills. So I would say the major difference in Europe and in a region in South Asia, particularly in Kashmir, that would be the fact that counter narratives are quite relevant. You need to provide them first with this context to build up on the alternative narrative front, which I think in Europe might not really be the case, because in Europe, you know, also a lot of these counter narrative approaches are just online, while in our case, we work on the offline field. So we try to work with the youth there, because online is also not, yeah, that's maybe the other thing. Online campaigns are also not that maybe successful, if they are, you know, at all. But these would be my two answers, and I would probably elaborate a little bit later when I explain.
Yeah, I think we will have a chance to discuss this better, and because of course part of the strategies we are discussing here, they go through digital media and social media, and so of course it's a different kind of approach. So I would like to conclude this first round with our last guest, which is Eduardo Macia from the association La Jolla. And of course, this is more of a practical experience with your association and with your everyday work. La Jolla works in creating a social space for young people to meet and do several activities. And we've seen some of them during the first part of this final conference. So what's your comment on this discussion on identity and radicalization, Eduardo?
Hello, good afternoon. And yeah, as I do say, I can give my inputs related to the work that we make at local level, because I think as was our friends here, they were speaking and they were talking about the identity was, I think, more than nice. But for us here in our area and our region related to the working with the Muslim community or Muslim young people related to the identity, I also agree about this kind of facts that, as you know, in Spain, we have a large number of Muslim people. It's around 2 million people that we have in Spain living. Mostly half of them, they are Spanish, born in Spain, but with the Muslim background, or immigrants coming from different parts of Africa and different countries of Europe and the world. In this case, for us, the work that we have with them and related to this identity or belonging to part of the activities and the things that we work with the organization is we are trying to support them and to involve them related to the culture. One of the biggest steps that we have, and also when we talk with the young people, with the Muslim young people, is this part of the culture of the religion and to understanding for the other youngsters this religion part. For the reason, during the year, we developed different kind of activities to connect different young peoples, to show the religions that they have, also to involve them in the different parts of the activities that we make in the organization, and to try to connect and to belong to the part of the organization, of the community that we are doing. Mostly of the people that they are coming is people that they have disadvantaged backgrounds, because the Muslims that they are part living in our area, they are belonging to Muslim communities in this case, as we have in our area, and they are mostly attending the activities in the Muslim communities. We have cooperation. We are working with different organizations, Muslim communities, to try to get together and to not to have this gap between the culture, between identities, or between religions, and to try to connect and to be part of one thing together. And for the reason, through the projects, in this case, these specific projects, we tried with different activities to connect together and also to avoid or to put out the young people from the part of radicalization. That is one of the objectives of the activities and the project that we have in the organization. I think the speech that I will do here is more as I do told as a practical things and activities that we are doing related to local things. But I think it's one of the important things for us and for the people working with the Muslim young people, or in general with the young people, is all the backgrounds that here the experts that we have are telling to us, and we need to take in consideration when we work with this. And I think one of the important things that I think Joanna was telling is like each community, each group is totally different, and we need to care about how we belong into the community and how we need to work with them, because Europe is very rich, and then also the Muslim young people in each area or in each country is getting in different ways, and we need to a little bit to see what is the reality, and through the reality to work with these things.
Thank you so much, Eduardo. This is a perfect bridge to the second part. So there will be less gloomy. Hopefully, we go to the bright side. And so we're trying to understand in your experiences, of course, some of you have more practical work with groups, others are more on the research side or applied research. Or working on an organization. So in your experience, what do you think it's the role of civil society in countering these narratives, and that in turn fuel radicalization? And of course, first of all, you can comment and see if you think that civil society can have a role at all, because you can also say civil society doesn't have a role. But if civil society has a role, what is this role, and what we can actually do to make the situation better, or like in this project Open, try to counter this narrative, promoting good practices, training, education, giving the tools to counter these narratives leading to polarization online on digital media. So I will go back to Ekrem for the start of the second part, and then I will give the floor to each one of the speakers, and then we can be a little bit more interactive and interrupt each other and kind of jump in the conversation if we have questions or things that we want to discuss. But first, let's do another round in which everybody can talk and have his say about this topic. So Ekrem.
Thank you, Michel. Firstly, I would like to answer directly for your question. If civil society can be like to take part on sensibilization against radicalization, I can say it can be a good opportunity, because instead of institutional government organization, civil society are more like on the ground. They can like face directly people, and they make like different activity on the ground and different neighborhoods, and it will be like a very big help to do wills and to reach some kind of people and to speak about the things. And for the second part about the solution, it's like we speak about a lot of problem. One of the big problem that we say that it's about creating identity, about making all the young people, it's like in the period that they create their own identity. And I think that the big lack that we have, it's like to have role model. It's like we also like use in this project to have also like in social campaigning about making news and presentation about Islam and like some initiatives. But the thing it's like if young people can in social media on the neighborhood have some role model who they can use, like to know that as Muslims they can have some success stories, can be like a positive things. And about in France, like we have this decentralized things, like for the government side, every governmentship, they give like training course for all civil society. It's like you have just to call them, and they make all civil society have to being present of people in the process of radicalization. They make about trainings, and this training is also open for all the youth center, local youth center, local organization. And it's like to deal and to about how to identify about radicalization can be one of the tools that we have here. It's also during the training course, they also give all the people, like for the civil society sites, give introduction about Islam, about also on a social basis, what's the difference of inside the Islam and all the historic and how it's like coming in this country about history in this kind of history. That can be so interested to do it. And about practice and good example that we do, that we already done. It's like making about event about living together. Like we make a group about 15 young girls and men, just Muslim people. We make like a weekend about living together. We first begin at the big mosque in Strasbourg. Then the second day we go to the big synagogue, and the third day it was a big church. And the idea was to everywhere that we go, it's like about have a little introduction about the religions, and all the description, it was focused about respect, mutual respect, about also living together and coexistence. That was the idea that we have to organize, and we do it like every year. And it's idea to also develop the perspective of young people to know that they have also different religion in Strasbourg, and like we can show them as a model, like they have coexistence between religions, they haven't really war, and they really have very good dialogue in Strasbourg, and like a very good model for you too. That's one of the things that we do. We already speak about social campaigning to make about good thing, but we already make like some trainings about we make a training for Muslim association, how to identify and what is radicalization, and how to deal with social media too, because it can be one of the step that we do, because most of the time Muslim organization really can't like moderate their social media, and we invite an expert and we do it like a workshop on it. What we do, we make also like different sensibilization with a local youth center that we have make a partnership. We made a weekend just for like we go to ski with the young people. We made just a little camp about ski. The second week we make about sensibilization about integration, the history of the integration in France, what's have to be a citizen in France. And the third one, it's like we speak in about radicalization. And the last event that we do, we made about a media literacy event, and that's we will continue it, because one of the things that we underline on this project, it's like most of the time they really don't check about the sources, and we want to like develop. It's like about making organizing some event to develop critical thinking and about media literacy. I think can be also a good initiative on it.
Thank you very much for this set of examples, very concrete examples from real projects. And I will now go to Andrea for answering basically the same question, but you can also answer, of course, from a different angle, not from concrete projects and experience, which of course I've always welcomed, but also if you think that civil society has a role to counter radicalization, and what is that role in creating alternative narratives or engaging these communities or building these communities with social media.
Thanks. Yes. Starting with practical project, with concrete project, I work here with the Programma Integra, also with other organizations in the idea of active citizenship through the history of religions. We realize several workshops in schools, in different levels of schools, from children to high school, to share and teach about the religious pluralism, the different religions in the world, from a historical and life perspective. So we speak about religions, but we speak also about agnosticism and atheism, of course, and different ideas. Because first of all, I think it's important to address the topic, to tackle the topic of religion. Maybe this is also related specifically to the Italian situation, because here we have what is called a religious analphabetism. There is a very important report made by Professor Alberto Melloni about how Italians are ignorant, usually, about religious tradition, about their own religion. It's very typical in Italy that people don't know what's the difference between Christianism and Catholicism. That's a typical situation. So if people thinking about that and becoming more aware of their own beliefs and other people's beliefs, it's always interesting and open the minds, I would say, make people more available, more willing to understand about other points of view. And these activities stimulate a general reflection about what religion is, that religions are, let's say in the plural, which I think is very important, because it's like we almost forgot that, in my opinion, the religions are, first of all, educative systems. I mean, that they are not just narratives of the world. They are, and were more in the past, way to educate people, to educate the human being about the vision of the world, about morality, that is about emotions, how to be able to manage your own emotions, and about how to act in society. So when we when we overlook religion and make them just a set of beliefs apart from the rest of human life, I think that we do a big mistake. That is a big mistake, that we need to understand their function and foster and promote education. I would say, because the main difference here, the main polarization that I see, is between believers and not believers. I mean, it's very usual to find that Christians and Muslims, or others, Christians and Muslims, of course, are the people that I meet more, are more similar between them than with other people, atheists or non-believers. Believers of different religious traditions understand each other because they have a base of common language, some basic concepts shared. So I think it's very important to focus on education. And absolutely what Ekram was saying is very important. Role models. A good quality religious education and role models are deeply important. Maybe just to give an example, it's a bit romantic, maybe, but I think very informative and interesting is, for example, that I really love the parallel stories of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. I mean, they were coming from a very similar background. One became the nonviolent prophet of Christian movements, and the other was considered usually a violent extremist Muslim. Okay, but this story, the life story of Malcolm X, it's an historical example of what a good religious education can do, because he, in a situation of very hard social distress and poverty, became vulnerable to an extremist organization that was at the time the Black Muslims, and became a violent leader. But things changed in his life and in his vision of the world when he did the Al-Hajj, the pilgrimage in Mecca. And then he discovered different sources. He discovered a totally different Islam and came back in USA to give voice to a very way more peaceful and interactive action in society. And that's just to say, no, it's kind of a movie, but a bit distant from nowadays Europe. But I think it's also important to have this kind of role models of mythical level of narratives and role models. And I think we should focus more on that.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for this perspective based on education and awareness of religion and how this can meet these identity needs that we all have, the youth, but everybody have this share this same need, and how, if this is not answered, how this can lead to these stories of radicalization. So I would like now to turn to Anne Heckendorf, and do you agree with this picture of the role of civil society, the key role of civil society through education and through training, through giving tools and training to fight this kind of radicalization online, these narratives? Or do you have different perspective on how we should go about tackling this issue?
I mean, I do agree that, of course, religious education is also important, but I would say that civil society has at least one other role, which is at least equally important, and that is that results from this idea that actually what is the appeal of terrorist organizations is the fulfillment of these psychosocial needs. So I think civil society, by engaging people, by providing an alternative to what terrorist organizations are offering, that means providing a community and providing a sense of purpose. I think that is an important role that civil society can play as well, besides education, of course. Besides that, I also think that there are some effects that civil society organizations have, for example, in terms of reducing stereotypes that other people have towards Muslims. Also, for example, if, and there's different models for doing so, if civil society has a way of connecting to central governments, for example, they can play a very important role in informing government policy because, as was said before, civil society is the closest to people. They understand the needs of actual local people the best. And that is also the case for the Muslim community. So if the Muslim community, civil society organizations that have Islamic nature or Islamic tendencies, if they can organize themselves well and connect with the government, exchange information, maybe institute some mechanisms for regular information exchange, I think that would also help the Muslim community to have a representation in official government policy. So I would also see that as quite an important role of civil society. I have a bit of an opinion on the counter-narrative approach. I'm not sure if now is the good time to address that, or shall we talk about that later on?
I'm muted. So I think it's it's relevant because maybe then the others can react to it later on. Okay.
Well, I think and that again, the argument that I have about counter-narrative approaches goes back to this idea again that that it's an exploitation. Terrorist propaganda is an exploitation of psychosocial needs, and these appeals that terrorist groups use are extremely strong. They're extremely sophisticated in exploiting young people's sentiments and needs. And unfortunately, counter-narratives just don't have this strong appeal, especially to people that don't have a positive outlook on life, that have made experiences with discrimination, perhaps. So they just won't be attracted to counter-narratives to the same extent as to the actual terrorist narratives. I mean, I do believe that in certain contexts it could have the effect of bolstering resilience, but it will not have an effect for people that are already in the process of radicalization. And that has to do, amongst other things, with confirmation bias. This idea that people tend to reject information that contradict their deeply held beliefs, and which, for example, also explains why there are flat earthers, even though there's an abundance of very scientifically well-founded information that prove that the earth is wrong. And I think the same is the case for radicalization. that people who so deeply tie their identity to a certain ideology, they will not be convinced by some counter narrative. And actually, there's a lot of studies. I mean, not a lot of studies because it's a understudied methodology. But the studies that exist show that oftentimes counter narrative approaches could actually be counterproductive because it sort of confirms what terrorist groups say, namely that the West is trying to paternalize them and to sort of discredit their beliefs. So that's why I would be very careful with the counter-narrative approach and in terms of its effectiveness and what it can actually do.
Thank you for sharing that. This is, I think, a very important point in this conversation. But then also the question is if maybe different approaches are what you said. So different approaches work with different groups or people at different stages. So maybe the education, the counter narrative, or the narrative in general, the social campaign can work for general awareness, but in some more specific cases where people are already radicalized, maybe something else can work. So also making this distinction is important. And now I would go to Joanna Barakova. Do you agree with these views, and what's your take on this?
Just regarding the question with the civil society's role, I very much agree with also what the other speakers talked about. The only point I would have add is that very much civil society organization act like the first point of contact on behalf of youth. Also because there's widespread trust deficit, whether it comes to local authorities or decision makers. So they play the important role of being a bridge between the young people and the authorities and the decision makers. And this is where maybe I'm making also the transition to when we talk about the counter narratives or alternative narratives. It's basically very important for a successful prevention of radicalization campaign to profoundly understand the needs, priorities, motivations, beliefs, and influences on the target audience or the young people, how, where they communicate, with whom they are inclined to respond. So in order to, and this is where, what I'm trying to say is that the counter narrative response could be helpful or not, but you need to know what are the messengers and mediums of communication of the target audience. So this is where you engage with actors, not only civil society organizations. You can still engage with, frontline practitioners, religious leaders, associations representing minority groups, role models or youth leaders, former, jihadists, victims of terrorism, educators, so scholars, family members, direct neighbors, etc. The reason for that is the same manner terrorist groups are using multiple platforms to communicate their message and different mediums of sharing this message. A campaign that is trying to tackle that should also be, very cohesive and comprehensive of these things. And this is where, maybe I can also give a brief description of Free for Youth, because this is exactly what we tried to do. Being aware of, and of course, this is something that develops with the process. It's a 3-year long project. We are now in the final stages of finishing it, so it's like 6 months left. But on the basis of that, we developed both offline and online, campaigns. Throughout the process, we realized that indeed the offline ones are actually much more successful. Also because you need this constant, exposure of the youth to, the what we discussed about, like, religious leaders, but also frontline practitioners, victims of terrorism, former jihadists. We had people who have been stone pelters, and young people as well, who explained why they've decided to desist from this path. And overall, we have basically, in total, we have 69 workshops, 54 of which have already been implemented. And in the first part of the project, which was last year, the first 6 months, we focused much more on the part where we explain what are the different theories of radicalization, push and pull factors, by bringing also, people whether victims or family members who have been of people who have engaged in terrorism, frontline practitioners, local authorities as well. We've been trying on multiple fronts to tackle, first of all, provide, this so-called, counter narrative, first basically exposing, what the terrorist groups in the region have been discussing, trying to debunk that, but simultaneously to that, also doing trainings on media literacy and information literacy. So basically enhancing the critical thinking, trying to show how social media could be, extremely luring and extremely, fraught with propaganda, which in a region like the ones we've been working, it's actually widespread. We were shocked in the very beginning to see that we distributed questionnaires because we have more than 500 young people who have been engaged throughout these trainings. And in the beginning, 80% of them, when asked, do you believe that what you read in social media is true? They said yes, which from a European perspective, you would be, most of the people would be surprised because it's almost ingrained in, in our educational system that more or less you do have this idea that, media and whether mainstream or social media is being used by certain actors to propagate their interest. Not, I'm not talking about terrorists, but just like, different political groups, for example. Whereas you see that in different contexts that could be very different. So this is where, you need to keep working on that. And we still continue doing this. But on that basis, basically, so we first started with that. Now with the second part of the project, we try to engage more with this so-called alternative narratives, where while again discussing, media literacy and information skills, we also try to promote, how to become, for example, how to get into civil society jobs, how to become a social media influencer if the people are interested, how to use social media to your, professional advantage. So from my perspective, in terms of how this project will be implemented, and we are also basically at the end of this project, we're going to issue like a handbook where we describe all these activities. We issue all the different exercises we've used and different approaches. We've discovered that it really needs to be on all levels. Like you cannot have neither counter nor alternative narrative, nor, what is called like government communication, strategies, which is basically the government itself trying to, the activities that they're undertaking to prevent radicalization. It really needs to be on multiple fronts. Like this is where civil society needs to engage with other actors. They need to engage local authorities, decision makers, victims of terrorism, and so on and so forth. Because and this in at least in our experience, it also needs to be very intensive. Publishing 10 videos and having 10 workshops, it's very unlikely that is going to work in the long term, especially if, you have someone who is really, largely already, indoctrinated. It needs to be very high intensive type of campaign. And we've also used social media. As I said, we've also done videos and stuff, but that was mostly for it was part of the offline activities. Like we had like online videos, designed to, for example, explain what is media bias, what is confirmation bias, what is, media literacy, etc. But we've used them alongside with the offline materials. So this is just very much in a nutshell. I've prepared some other things, but I believe that the other speakers have also something to say. So in case anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much. This was very interesting, and we are looking forward to the results. Having a look at the results of this project that is connected to, I think, many other things everybody on the screen is doing. So it would be nice to keep this connection. And you said that the offline is more successful, but at the same time, it goes hand in hand with the digital part, media literacy, and developing critical thinking, because there on these digital platforms is where this radicalization narrative plays. So it's important that the two go hand in hand.
Yeah, just to add, like the project itself was about preventing also radicalization online. So in essence, trying to prevent young people in Jammu and Kashmir to fall prey to these narratives. What I'm trying to explain is that a lot of the approach for getting this media literacy knowledge and information knowledge was offline, because we realized this is the most successful strategy. But we are trying to teach people to be critical of what they read online. So because this is where the narratives of terrorist groups are proliferating, of course. But what I'm trying to say is that the offline activities, while addressing the online problem, are very important as well.
Yeah, that's clear. Thank you so much. And I will now turn to Eduardo. And from your experience, what do you have to add to this conversation about building this sense of community as an answer to some of these identity and isolation issues that sometimes lead to radicalization?
Yeah, I think that's one of the important key aspects when we are talking about this role of the civil society that we have in the community, because I think all the agents and the organization and the stakeholders that we have around they have the role, and they have the opportunity to get involved with the young people, in this case with the mostly young people. And I think when you are providing to them with different activities, with different workshops, with different connections with the community, they are belonging to something, and they are appreciating these kind of things. As I was referring before, I think one of the important aspects for us when we are working with the young people in general, and mostly when we are connecting with different religions, with different cultures, and with different backgrounds, the most important is for everyone to understand the others and to try through different kind of integration activities, different kind of workshop related with media literacy, critical thinking, to connect each other and to see the reality of the different background of the young people, and through these kind of actions a little bit to avoid other actions. One of we are talking about a little bit the good practice in this case in our community here in Elche. What the police department related to radicalization in general decided to create 2 years ago was to get involved all the main actors in the civil society in our community. That means the Muslim community, the young community, stakeholders, municipality, and different organizations working and connecting with the young people, and to put all of them together. Because sometimes one of the main aspects that we have here in Spain is this kind of aggressive hate speech that we have against, or there is in general against the Muslim community, that most of the people, they are telling, or they are suggesting, okay, the people is coming here to take the work that we have for the Spanish people. And in this case, the action that the police was doing is to put all together this kind of organizations working with the young people, and to try to create a plan, and to try to connect them, to see and to make face-to-face these kind of situations, and to try how to avoid before it's happened. That means that sometimes for them, or for the police in general, to enter to specific communities, in this case the Muslim, the Gypsy communities, was very hard. But through this action, to connect all the main actors in these communities, they have now the easy job to try to connect, or to avoid actions in the areas. Because when something is happening, they go directly to the main person in the community, and through this person they are acting in local level. And I think it's important, this role of the civil society, and mostly to connect all the actors that we are working with the young people, doesn't matter in general, Muslims or everything in general, to avoid the radicalization. Here we are talking specific on Muslim, but we are also, in Spain, we have also young people, not only Muslim, going to these Latin groups or different kind of groups that through not belonging to nothing, they are capturing them and they are like taking. For this reason, for us, it's very important the connection, not only what the work that we are doing in the organization, but the connection that we have with the different civil society, municipalities, police, Muslim communities, Gypsy community, all the actors that we have in the community, because in the end, what is enriching the work that we are doing, the connections, and through the problems that we have, we can solve or we can connect. That is more simple in the end to work. If I told my opinion, yes, civil society, to be connected and to be part of the radicalization, I think is one of the main pillars. Not only one organization working with this, but also the support of the rest of the people. If not, it will be very difficult to get to these groups.
Thank you, Eduardo. And now we conclude this round. We still have some time if you want to develop a little bit or go deeper into some of the issues, or if you have some questions or additional comment that you didn't manage to cover previously. I think it was a very informative session, and we covered a lot, and I also liked the breadth and diversity of perspective here. And I gained a lot, I must say, from this. And of course, on the solutions, I can tell on my side that what we are doing at my institute, School of Transnational Governance, is more reflecting on the governance level. And that's why it's so interesting to hear about the civil society perspective, because normally we're trying to analyze these technologies and these challenges, and then try to figure out what's best regulation in different forms. So not just the laws, but also common standards, good practices, soft law, and other kind of regulation, how this can play out and help these processes to limit polarization, disinformation, or issues arising from the use of technology, which should be for peace, to connect us, but sometimes it's bringing us apart. And so, yeah, it was very clear that education has a key role, education about religion, awareness of religion, but also education in the sense of community building, of building, of answering to this identity needs of young generations. And for me, it's I'm just throwing there some reflections, but it will also be interesting to understand the political aspect of it, where we see that sometimes politicians or group of interests are sometimes active player in promoting this kind of polarization. So it's not just something that comes naturally from the social system, but there are some people that are trying to fuel this and use this politically. So also a reflection on that and how to counter that would be interesting. And I guess again through awareness and through the promotion of a culture of tolerance, and on promoting the good cases, so the successful cases and the successful and the positive narratives. So this is my reflections at this point. I don't have like a final question, but if you want to add to these reflections or to the conversation, feel free to jump in and raise your hand, or just again give us some other questions to reflect on. I see Joanna Barakova has his hand raised, so I will give the floor to Joanna.
No, I just wanted to quickly comment on what you just mentioned regarding the basically this current phenomena of, populist not current phenomena, but something that we also right now we saw with, the fires in Sweden, because of, in Denmark, you have this and like Islamophobic and anti-immigrant political leader who was, who made claims of who wanted to burn the Quran, etc. And this is a very interesting emerging phenomena right now with this kind of cycle of mutual feeding of radicalization between jihadist and far right elements. And it's basically a phenomena that we really need to be alert of, because you also see the repercussions on a really global scale, not only Europe, but as we all know, the shootings in New Zealand in the mosque were allegedly a response to the terrorist attack in Sri Lanka in 2019 on the churches there. So we see this, basically global dynamics between different groups that use, as a justification, violence taking place against, their perceived identity or group for them to engage in violence, which creates like really a vicious circle. In terms of how to tackle that, I don't think I have the answer. I don't know if anyone has this answer. I'm just mentioning it more of something that we really need to as researchers or civil society or people who work in the decision-making sphere, we really need to be alert, because this becomes more and more visible and more of a growing. So this is just something that I just wanted to add. And of course, if someone has an opinion on that, I personally would be very curious also to hear.
Anybody else wanted to add on this topic? It's of course a difficult task, but yeah, if you don't have additional comments, Andrea, Anne, or Ekrem, or Eduardo, we can also move to the closing of this session. And yeah, Andrea.
I would say just something very shortly.
Okay.
I think one of the main points, sorry for the hand, is complexity. I mean, the problem always, very often, is to deal with complexity. It's always like that. My experience is about this teaching and workshop about religions. And often people are so surprised to discover that there are different types, different confessions within Christianity, within Islam, within every tradition. And then further, there is we often speak about this concept of super diversity created by Bertovets, which is in our current societies. There is a situation of extreme complexity. And we need to keep that always in mind, that you can meet people that have the most mixed backgrounds, a system of beliefs. And so I think it's important to like we said before, like Anne and also Joanna said, to avoid generalizations, which are quite dangerous, and promote also a culture of, I would say, positive individualism. I mean, you have to remember, and you have to teach and to share, to promote the idea that every single person is a word. Every single person could be totally different. So in this sense, individualism is very important for society. It's a very social value. Just that.
Okay, thank you for this additional comment. Indeed, very interesting. And I would like to close this session first of all by thanking all of you, and thank you to Ekrem Sahin, Director of European Muslim Union, and to Andrea Pintimalli, researcher at Programma Integra and University La Sapienza. and Eduardo from the Association La Jolla, and Anne Heckendorf and Joanna Barakova from the European Foundation for South Asian Studies. And to conclude, I think this was very, very informative session, and I will go back to it and listen it again because I took some notes, but there was so many different aspects on this conversation. And I also thank you, Joanna, for adding this last comment, which I think is very relevant on the globalization of the violence and on the reiteration of violence fueled by identity issues. And I think this is a very, very important issue, and that's why, and also very, maybe we're not thinking about it because we had other issues, COVID, and now we have some conflicts in Europe, but it's something that is just there. And it is working out as we're talking, and it can become again central very soon. And maybe we're not thinking enough about it. And prevention is always better than reaction. So just to say that this project, Open, and the projects you are working on and similar projects are so important in order to prevent this from happening and building this culture of tolerance, of awareness of diversities before it's too late. So with that, I thank again the organizers of this final conference and Umberto from Project Open for this invitation. It was a real pleasure. And I will give the floor back to you as a housekeeper for the final word. And thank you very much. And I hope to talk to you again very soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Michele, for this very important presentation. I think that this roundtable was very, very interesting. I take a lot of notes, and also I will re-listen all the round table because it was very, very full of thoughts. I think now the project officially will be closed, but I think also on this occasion was an opportunity to meet also other people from different experience. We meet the project Free for Youth. We meet you that has another kind of experience, but of course we work with different perspective and with different angles to something that is very similar. So I think in the future we can continue the work with other projects maybe, or also try to use the tool and what we have done in these projects. The web pages will continue to work. We have to populate with the new contents. Of course, the conference will be available for all the people that today miss, or also for people that want to re-listen again. And I think we have a lot of space to continue this work because Open Project is just the beginning of something that has to be done in different places and in different countries. Thank you very much to all the participants, to all the speakers, to the volunteers, to all the organizations that with us create these projects. And on behalf of the Open Project and on behalf of my organization, that is Area 2.0, I would like to thank also the audience and the people that will listen in future this conference. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Umberto. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Umberto.